Hi guys, Ash McAuliffe here from the AssetLab, and today's question that we're answering is what is the difference between a defined benefit and an accumulation superannuation fund. So I get to do a little bit of drawing today. Hopefully you enjoy. Right, accumulation funds versus defined benefit funds. So, an accumulation fund is probably what's most common. Not many defined benefit funds exist. Most people have an accumulation fund of some sort, where your investment account, what you're going to retire on, or what your current balance is worth, your bag of cash, so to speak, is made up of a couple of factors. Number one, contributions. So what's put into your fund? That could be your employer contribution, so your superannuation guarantee, which is currently 9.5%, it's going up to 12 eventually. It could be your salary sacrifice amounts, which is what you're putting in pre-tax dollars. It could also be other contributions from the government, such as the co-contribution scheme, etc. So what goes into your fund is very important. The other thing that contributes to your balance is the earnings. So in your super fund you have investments. That's things like shares, property, cash, bonds, term deposits, etc. Whatever your superannuation account is invested in will generate earnings, and that will contribute to your overall balance. Now, the other things that can contribute to your balance in a negative way is tax. Your earnings on superannuation is taxed at 15%. Contributions, some of them, most of them are taxed at 15% as well. The non-concessional contributions, they're taxed at zero because you've already paid income tax on them. But tax certainly plays a part in your final balance in an accumulation fund. Interestingly, a super fund pays capital gains tax as well. It pays capital gains tax at 15% unless it has held the asset for more than 12 months, where it gets a discount and it only pays 10%. The other thing that can impact in a negative way is fees, and that's a big discussion point for a lot of people. There's a couple of different types of fees that can exist in a superannuation fund. Firstly, there's investment fees. So when you have an investment like a share or a managed fund or a property, there's costs involved in that, and there's fees involved with running the managed funds, and those fees will come out usually before your fund sees a return. They'll come out pre-return to your fund, but they still have an impact. The investment fees that you pay within your fund are important to monitor. Next, you have things like platform fees. Some are flat dollar fees, some are percentage based, but they will be for the platform that is managing your superannuation. That covers things like trustee expenses, custodial expenses, administration expenses. Lastly, there is advice fees. So if you're getting advice on your superannuation, it's possible for you to pay for that advice through your superannuation. You can only pay a fee through superannuation if that advice relates to superannuation and your retirement, and that can be in a percentage base or a flat dollar. In days gone by, it used to be a commission. Commissions are no longer. Some people still charge a fee as a percentage. Most people are now starting to work on flat dollar based advice fees on an ongoing basis or an ad hoc basis or a once-off basis. So fees are something that are very important. They do have an impact on your account balance. The last thing that can have a negative impact is costs. So that is things like insurance. So a lot of people have insurance in their superannuation. Some self-managed funds have costs associated with managing properties. Any of those costs, other than fees, for managing your superannuation have a negative impact on your contributions. Now, Defined benefit. Defined benefits are a little bit different. The things that impact the amount that you'll have to retire on include your salary. So most defined benefit funds, it's an equation based on your salary, your years of service, so how long you've been a member, and also your age. Varying defined benefit schemes have a different equation, and they're usually quite complex. But what they end up doing is the more you earn, the longer you've been a member, and the older you are, the higher your balance. So your employer does contribute, and a lot of times you as an employee will contribute as well, but that contribution is only going to fund this equation. There's not a direct link between what's going into the fund and what your end of year payout will be. I can put some links to a couple of different equations there, but they're all very complex, and there's not a lot of defined benefits remain. Most of them are closed to new members. So how does that compare? Well, let's have a look at the difference. So the factors that are different between the two: investment risk, duration of income. Another word for that is longevity risk. Longevity risk. Is your superannuation or your income stream going to last long enough for you, or longer than you will at least? So your future value. So what the value of your fund is when you retire. Changes in salary. And amount that you can roll over if you want to change funds. And so as a member, what risks? So we'll look at those from each side of that equation. So on the accumulation side, investment risk, that resides with you or the member. So if the investments that you select do or don't perform, that's a risk that you take. On the defined benefit side, that actually rests with the fund. So they know what contributions they're going to receive. If they invest poorly or well, that's up to them, because remember, that equation is not going to change. They're just investing those funds to make sure they can fund those obligations at a later date. Next is duration of income. So in an accumulation fund, that rests with the member. If you draw too much down on it, or you don't invest it well when you're in retirement, then how long that income lasts is going to affect you. In a defined benefit, it's infinite, because that income is going to keep coming until you pass away. And in most cases, particularly in Australia, there will be a subsequent lower payment to a spouse. The future value of your fund, so that's the value when you retire, that in an accumulation fund, that depends on contributions and investments. So the more you contribute and the more aggressively you invest, that will impact the future value of your fund. In a defined benefit, it doesn't matter. It's a formula. Now, a lot of those formulas are enhanced if you decide to make member contributions as well, or your own contributions, but it only changes the equation. And in a lot of cases, I've had clients before where they've been 50, 55, and they've maxed out the equation. They can't actually go any higher, so they've got to think of something else, like usually a second accumulation fund to top up the defined benefit fund, or to continue getting value by making contributions. Changes in salary in an accumulation fund, it only increases contribution. Okay, so if you're earning $100,000, you get your super guarantee contributions. When you get a pay rise, your super guarantee contributions go up. In a defined benefit, again, because it's based on a formula, an increase in salary will have an increase in the in the value of your fund. Again, now if you change jobs and you want to roll out of your super fund, in an accumulation fund, it's what is in there on the day. So how your funds have been invested, what's been contributed to date. If you roll this over, again, it's a formula. So a lot of these formulas, they have an age factor in there, so the older you are, the larger the amount will be. So sometimes you can not get as much as you would in retirement because you're pulling it out a little bit earlier. So at the end of the day, would you say there's more risk in an accumulation fund for the member? So I'd say yes. The member assumes most of the risk in an accumulation fund. They take the investment risk, so they decide how things are invested, and the performance of those investments will ultimately determine how much they have to retire on. The duration of income is dependent on the member because they can choose how much they draw as an income in retirement. The future value is impacted, or the risk there is taken by the member because they've got to make contributions and they've got to make their investment decisions. A change in salary will have a positive impact, but only to the extent of super guarantee, and the amount you roll over is only what's there on the day. In a defined benefit, it's the fund that takes the investment risk because they're investing in order to meet their obligations. There's no direct link between the investment of the funds and the amount they need to pay out. Duration of income, they're really working along the factors of longevity. So they're obliged to pay a set amount of pension in most cases and for the lifetime of the member. So that could be good, that could be bad for them, but they're wearing the risk. Future value is based on a formula, so that's something they don't have any control of, other than they need to make sure they can fund it. Changes in salary, if someone has a significant salary increase, bam, they've got a significant increase in the value of their fund. If they roll it over again, it's that formula. So as far as risk is concerned, the fund takes most of it. So that probably explains why there's not so many remaining defined benefit funds around. So hopefully that explains the difference. Apologies for my handwriting and my drawing. I'm good with numbers, not pictures. But if you have any questions, post them below. Thank you very much.